Welcome back to The Void. We are the only podcast on YouTube that's about movies. We've looked, we've checked, we're the only one. This is part 2 of our Every Batman Movie Ever ranking and analysis. I'm Grant.
And I'm Jack, and I guess we took a quick break for a little memento.
Pow! Pow pow! Now we just got to figure out, where were we? Where were we? Where did we leave off? We talked last time in part 1 about all of the movies up till the Christopher Nolan ones, right? We went all the way up until 2005. So now we're going to start with, because we're going chronological, and then at the end, we're going to reveal each of our rankings in terms of quality of what the best and worst Batman movies are.
Now, before we get into that, since our discussion last time, have you actually changed any of your rankings based on the way we've talked?
Great question. No. I have not revised my list since we have last talked. However, I have actually gone back and rewatched some of the movies that we're going to talk about today, and I feel even stronger about where I've placed them on my list.
Ooh, intriguing.
Now, just to remind the listener that the reason that we're doing this is because you injected all of the Bat movies into your veins at an accelerated rate. You've become Man-Bat. Kirk Langstrom, the Man-Bat. He hasn't appeared in a movie yet, but maybe someday. He's a man that becomes a bat. And you watched them all back to back. And so I've watched them a million times, all of them. And so, that's the kind of two perspectives that we are bringing to this. So should we jump in? Should we talk about Batman Begins, the reboot? The first reboot, really. It was it kicked off reboot.
Really?
I mean, it is. This is before Casino Royale. This is before you name it. This is the first, because there was concern at the time. Let me take you way back to 2004, 2005. Movie comes out in 2005. Anticipation for it begins in 2004. The Intimidation Game is the working title of the script that does leak online. And Christian Bale, because of his performance in American Psycho, was far and away the internet's top choice to play Bruce Wayne / Batman. And Christopher Nolan, coming off of Memento in particular, was, the hot young hotness, the hot young talent. It seemed like a good pairing, and David Goyer on the script, who was known as a big comic book aficionado. And you could see in the script and in the whole Nolan trilogy, you could see a love for the source material, and then it deviates where it does, but it is always building on ideas from the comics that it will take and turn into new things. 2005, people are familiar with Batman. People are familiar with the Batman movies. So who killed Bruce Wayne's parents? The Joker did. Because that's how it happened in Batman 89. Jack Nicholson, the Joker, did.
Now, something I've been wanting to ask you with this is, since all this has happened, we've seen bits and bobs of that Burton Schumacher fifth Batman movie, whatever the heck it was supposed to be. I've heard things like Coolio was supposed to play, was it Batman or Scarecrow or something like that?
I believe Howard Stern was being looked at as Scarecrow. They wanted Harley Quinn to be the daughter of the Joker, and they were going to bring back Jack Nicholson to play the Joker in a hallucination that Batman have.
In 2004, 2005, was the internet aware of this at the time?
I think so. I think Batman Triumphant is, because it was reported on in the magazines, like around when Batman and Robin was coming. It was like, well, the next one, there was like a long period of, well, what's going to happen? When it became clear that Batman and Robin was such a failure, that Batman Triumphant wasn't going to happen, and then that series was effectively dead. It was going to be, well, what do they do next? And so there were a number of projects, and dear listener, you can go on to any sort of a Wikipedia journey and look at some of the canceled projects, but just to cover a few of them, famously, maybe infamously, there was a Frank Miller written script based on his year one graphic novel that Darren Aronofsky was attached to direct, and it is very dark, very violent, and does significant major changes to the Batman mythos that are pretty interesting and maybe even ahead of the curve, but audiences and studios weren't ready for the kind of, I would say, Sin City level of gratuitous violence that, he's like stabbing guys in that. I mean, it could be cool, stabbing corrupt mayor in the eye with a pen. That's one of the memorable moments in the year one script. And can't remember a lot else. I remember Big Al. I remember Alfred is like a mechanic who is kind to Bruce Wayne because he doesn't have his fortune yet. He's presumed dead. So, but by the end of the movie, he gets his money. That's in the year one. There was also a George Miller Justice League. George Miller, who directs Mad Max movies, and Happy Feet, and Happy Feet 2.
I feared the worst too, Bill, because fearing the best is a complete waste of time.
He was going to do a Justice League. There was, there was a Batman Beyond. There were a number of false starts before Batman Begins, after Batman and Robin. But Batman Begins was a shift in the paradigm. It was a game changer. It changed Hollywood, Hollyweird, and we got a movie that was pretty beloved, but nobody called it, perfect. Everybody had some issue with Batman Begins, as I recall. Like there were people that were not thrilled with another rubber suit, and particularly that the neck looked kind of heavy and that he couldn't move it effectively, which was a problem from the first Michael Keaton Batsuit all the way until The Dark Knight. He can't move his head, so he's got to do the dramatic about face turn and step. The third act that escalates into a big save the city thing with the fear gas and the being in the pipes and the vaporizer. I remember loving it, and I still love it. And that's a long ramble to get to be, that. So with that stage set, what was your experience watching Batman Begins for the first time?
So I came to it, of course, years and years later. When it came out initially, it was kind of a background noise thing to me. I remember seeing reviews in the local paper that was like, B, it's all right. It's fun, but it's not great. Whatever. Like, if this is the start of something, maybe they can build on it. Okay, cool. And wrote it off until I paid a little more attention when the next movie came out and everybody hailed it as the greatest thing of all time. But we'll get to that. With Batman Begins, when I first watched it, it was kind of a mixed bag for me because we're seeing Bruce more or less forcibly taken on his full emotional journey, start to finish, almost, it feels like, minus the found family aspect, which they somehow managed to not do in that entire trilogy. It's interesting to me. You have this at the start. He's portrayed as the anti-hero almost instead of the actual hero that he's usually portrayed as. They're really leaning on the I'm ready to die, I have nothing to lose, blah blah blah. And that part of the movie works pretty well to me. It fits into sort of we're just starting to get into the grimdark era where everything's gray of the early aughts. It's more or less fun. The problem is the villains. Scarecrow is woefully misused. He's there in the movie, but he's no longer a threat after like 3 scenes. And Ra's al Ghul, please tell me if I mispronounce that, because I hear like 7 different pronunciations of that depending on the media I'm watching.
Right, it's Ra's al Ghul in the movies. In the animated series, it's Ra's al Ghul. I don't know. Tomato.
I like Liam Neeson's portrayal of the character, but again, this is a movie that feels relatively grounded until that ending where it just really goes full-blown comic, and you get the Batman. Is Batman's no-kill rule really a no-kill rule? We're going to play real fast and loose with that.
Yeah, it was not a rule established until this movie in the movies. It was a big deal in the comics, particularly in the 80s and 90s and 2000s, and still is, but is sometimes emphasized and sometimes not emphasized. In Batman Begins, it's very emphasized that his one rule is he won't kill, except for the house full of ninjas, except for the Wayne Manor full of ninjas, except for Ra's al Ghul on the train at the end. So he won't commit murder, but he will be fine with manslaughter. He's kind of lawyering his own charges as it goes.
So, in regards to the no-kill rule, I was talking with some friends recently, and something that was brought up was that the no-kill rule was likely introduced by the Comic Code Authority, because there was this weird period where they got weird about things, and if you wanted to sell your comics in like grocery stores, I think it was, you had to really toned down the violence. And so everybody wanted to sell their comics in grocery stores because that made a lot more money than selling them in mom and pop shops. So suddenly Batman was no longer throwing people off cliffs or whatever.
Right, he does kill in his early appearances in the comics, but the other main thing is it's just logistical with not killing villains. Is you want to bring a character like the Joker back. You don't want to be using him once and then that's it. So they eventually stopped toying around with like, is he dead? Is he not dead? Which they did for a long time and still do in the comics. But he's never actually going to die. The Joker's not actually going to go away. He will always return, just like Batman will always return as long as there's demand for more of their stories. So you're right, though, that the first 2/3 of the movie being very Bruce Wayne's journey, emotional journey, is better than the last third. I still like the last third. It does become a comic book thing, but it is a comic book thing. It's a comic book movie. It doesn't feel. It does feel like it's in a similar place as a movie later in the timeline, The Batman, which also feels like it ends and then there's a third act where the city floods and you're like, oh right, I forgot this was a Batman movie and Batman's a superhero, so that means he has to save the city, as opposed to Batman is a action hero, so he has to just deal with whatever like the stakes are of his own adventure. Nevertheless, I think it's interesting. Also, another thing that's coming to mind is the way that Batman Begins was sort of perceived by general audiences as well. There's kind of a famous commercial clip for the CW, or maybe it wasn't even the CW yet. It might have been still the WB network, where Batman Begins was going to premiere on TV. And the way they cut it together, it's like a romantic drama, like a sweeping story between him and Katie Holmes. He's got to fight for his family or fight for his love. Christian Bale.
Kind of beginning for a legendary hero.
Does it come in black?
He fights for family and lives for love.
I never stopped thinking about you.
Christian Bale and Katie Holmes.
Batman Begins tonight on the CW.
I remember you sending me the link to this trailer, and it's an unreal piece of editing that they were able to turn this thing into something that looked like almost a rom-com, which is as far removed from what this movie is. Batman does not get the girl. Batman does not even get close to getting the girl. He does, I guess, save the city if you ignore the hundreds of deaths along the way. But my hot take around that is I actually like Katie Holmes' Rachel better.
I like her. I think, and she was dogpiled at the time for not being a serious enough actress. And also, she was at that time married to Tom Cruise, who at that time was making a big old fool of himself, jumping on couches.
This was jumping on the couch with Oprah time.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that may have been the reason she wasn't invited back. The official word is that it was a scheduling difference, but the recasting, maybe Warner Brothers or Nolan was uncomfortable with the amount of additional separate attention that they were bringing to it, and they didn't want to, I don't know. But I think Katie Holmes is good in it. I think she's definitely very believable as like childhood best friend. She is an invention of Goyer and the Nolans. She is a like kind of like a Mary Jane Watson sort of character added in, who is helpful because Bruce Wayne doesn't really have like a Peter Parker supporting cast of friends, and for him to have somebody that knew him from before is pretty important. Other than just Alfred, it gives us a good perspective into his character. I think this movie does a lot of things really well, though. I think it does the time jumps really well. And seeing the sort of the if not the extremely practical ways that Batman is created, the emotional steps needed are believable. And I think that's what resonates with this movie the most. Is like you're for the first time kind of like invested into, oh, what he's doing isn't right exactly, and maybe it's not even good exactly, but it kind of works out well enough. And moreover, you're rooting for him.
It's easy to root for him. It's easy to believe the journey he's on. I just wish this movie had gotten better villains to work with. I wish the supporting cast was given better material to work with. Like, we've talked about Katie Holmes being a believable childhood friend, but I think we run into the issue that I repeatedly complain about, where Nolan has no idea how to write a woman, and it really shows in this movie. And the last thing that I really liked about this movie that they abandoned in the sequels is there's this particular vision of Gotham when you get the wide sweeping shots of the city, the establishing, here we are in Gotham. This city that looks like it's in the middle of this industrial, almost steampunk revolution, and it's abandoned for Chicago in the sequels.
Yeah. Yeah. The Narrows is like this important district that needs to be saved in Batman Begins, and then you never hear it again. They don't bring up the Narrows again in the sequels, I don't think. Maybe once. Even then, I don't think so. I don't think the Narrows gets a name check.
I think there's a little bit of an implication in the movie that the Narrows is just done. It's lost. Like everybody went crazy and died, or something like that.
The question everyone asks with the plot of the third act is that, was nobody boiling water for spaghetti? Like, if it's activated by vapor, what, like, anybody using water, heating up water, they would be going crazy. But I guess that's happening. That's not even like a plot hole. You know, one of the things I don't like about this movie is another just way that it's dated and just trying to be like a 4-quadrant movie and having to be a big studio tentpole, is that, like, there are lines in there like, "Ooh, I got to get me one of those." Gordon says that about the Batmobile. Shut the fuck up, Gordon. Or like
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne to Lucius Fox driving around the Tumbler, the new Batmobile. Does it come in black? Oh, are you Batman? Because that you're Batman, so it needs to come in black. Okay, thank you. It's just kind of like trailer quips. They're still there in the other two Nolan movies, but in this one they stick out a little harder to me for whatever reason. But so Batman Begins is like a modest hit. It makes, I remember the countdown to it making over 300 million. There was, but it was like, it wasn't like a major massive blockbuster hit, but it was like a decent on base hit, maybe a double in the baseball
Yeah.
metaphor.
I feel like 300 million in
Yeah.
2005 or 6 or whenever this was that it came out. That's pretty good for.
Yeah, it was one of the top grossing movies of the year, right? So I mean, it's like definitely like a hit. And then at the end of the movie, they tease the Joker. Nolan swears up and down, like, "Oh, we didn't," but they did arc out like a 3-movie vision with Batman Begins, and they knew Joker would be 2, and then 3 changed a lot because they couldn't continue using the Joker. When the Joker was first cast, it was the opposite of like when the Christian Bale as Batman news. Like, Christian Bale as Batman, the internet nerds rejoiced. Heath Ledger as the Joker, it was like seeing the Wind Waker on GameCube for the first time. People were falling over, pointing and laughing like, "Oh, the Batman movies are sunk." Patrick Bateman, Christian Bale as Bateman Begins.
Oh my God.
This is going to be a joke. They got Brokeback Mountain, 10 Things I Hate About You, Heath Ledger. This is the Joker? Never going to top Jack Nicholson. Get out of town, buddy. Oh, and they got Harvey Dent in this one. Oh, that means Harvey Dent will become Two-Face in the third movie. Fans, of course, are always so, focused on, of course, they're right. Like, so then the immediate reactions to The Dark Knight were, holy shit, Heath Ledger's Joker is great. And then there was, again, some concern about the third act of like, oh, but did they rush Harvey Dent as Two-Face? Which even for a moment at the time, I sort of almost agreed with. Now, in hindsight, I definitely don't. Like, the movie's heart is with Harvey Dent, and his arc being over the course of one movie is right, makes sense. He pairs perfectly well with the Joker as villains and as different sides of Batman, essentially. The Dark Knight has only grown in esteem as time has gone on. It was like a rapidly growing snowball. And also, I remember like the hype for it too. Like, I don't know if you remember, well, you probably don't because you saw these later. But there was the opening bank heist was shown early as part of like an extended trailer with the movie I Am Legend. So I remember seeing I Am Legend just to see the first glimpse of the Joker, and it was pretty cool. I mean, we were in Ohio, we were bored. It was fine.
I saw this. The problem is that I went to go see I Am Legend sometime in college with my roommate at the time, and I was running like an 102 fever at the time. So I mostly remember just sweating in the theater. So I think I saw that scene, but I saw it sort of under duress.
Perfect. That's I think how most of the audience felt. And actually I Am Legend also semi predicted the Batman versus Superman movie that would come after the Nolan movies, because that was a billboard in the background of I Am Legend in the abandoned Times Square scene. How
Yeah.
about that? Warner Brothers
Wow.
charting out movies ahead of time. Who could imagine such a thing, that they would want to bring Batman and Superman together on screen?
I don't think it turned out the way they want it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were accurate in that when, society did end roughly around the time that movie came out. So, yeah, tell me your thoughts on The Dark Knight.
Well, when I saw The Dark Knight, yeah, the same sort of things, like Heath Ledger's Joker absolutely blew me away. I always sit there and I wonder, though, there's like this small cynic in me. It's like, is my opinion shaped at all by the fact that Ledger died during post-production? And I want to say no, because it is a really good performance, but it's probably shaped a little bit by it. And that feels bad to say.
Especially when there's I remember people being like, the Joker killed him. He went crazy because he played the Joker, and he just started taking all these drugs and doing crazy things because he played the Joker. He played a couple movie roles after he played the Joker before he died.
Yeah, he died in the middle of filming
The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Very weird movie in its own right. Very surreal. Kind of fits with Heath Ledger in a post-Joker world. But they still released that movie despite him dying in the middle of filming. I believe they finished it by just bringing in other actors to continue to play the role. So I think in the end there was Johnny Depp, Jude Law, and Colin Farrell combined efforts to finish out the film. Weird film.
In any case, the Joker wasn't his final role. Another Heath Ledger, at least one other Heath Ledger movie came out posthumously. It's a great performance. Really pretty radical reimagining of the Joker as just a guy with makeup on, which I know sounds ridiculous. Of course, but it's like in the Jack Nicholson one, he falls into a vat of acid. In the comics, he's always been a guy who's come from a vat of acid.
Yeah.
So he's presented a certain way, almost like a alien type of figure, where it's like he's been so changed that he's just nothing remotely human. Heath Ledger's Joker is very deliberately human. He's very clearly grounded in practicality, I guess, even though his plans are impractical and insane and could only work in a movie logic. He's not, he's using he likes it, like he says, he likes the cheap stuff, the gasoline, matches, guns, knives. He's a kind of low tech Joker without a big Joker mobile.
Yeah. It's, as you've and I have both said, it's a more grounded, it almost feels like, take, even though it is an insane take and plot of everything that happens that could only possibly work with comic logic. It still manages to come across somewhat grounded. When you go back after this and you look at things like the Nicholson Joker, there's this extra level of weird, campy insanity added to it, where you have things like Nicholson's Joker is face painting himself to have normal human skin so that he can go around in public, which feels really weird in hindsight, now that I think about it.
Yeah, it's super weird. And it's way scarier that the Joker is just the movie kind of implies that, maybe he was ex-military in some capacity. His dialogue's really fun because everything he says is both truthful and deceitful at the same time. So he's kind of always walking this tightrope of how much you should believe him. He's not necessarily lying when he's saying that he's a guy with, no plans. He's a dog chasing cars. He wouldn't know what to do with one if he caught one. But at the same time, he's a mastermind planner who has orchestrated all of these things, including Harvey Dent kidnap and downfall and so forth. The insane getting caught to be able to get out of the jail. Like that's an absurd degree of planning, and that a guy who has no plan, like that's not accurate. But he is. It's true that he's not looking to be like a leader in the way that Ra's al Ghul or Bane as villains are. He's not looking to create Joker land utopia. He's looking to burn it all down.
It's certainly the most complicated thing I've ever seen out of the Joker. It's usually feels much more tongue in cheek, borderline circus themed.
Yeah.
Much more leaning in on the joke part of things rather than, boy, isn't society a joke, which again, we can get into that later.
Yeah.
Which again, 2008, we're now deep in the thick of the aughts. Everything is gray, everything is grim, and it is perfect for that moment.
Yeah. It definitely like that aesthetic of kind of a lot of grays and browns and sort of muted colors and toning down the colorful aspects. Doesn't work for everything, but it certainly worked well for Batman and the Joker in this case. Every time I rewatch this movie, I am stunned by how compelling and gripping it is from the first moment to the last moment. It is intense throughout, and you are hooked throughout. It does an amazing job of visual storytelling, constantly doing like little misdirects, but making sure that you follow along. It doesn't get so up its own butt with its, the complicated layers of its logic that you can't follow it. You're guided through the maze pretty well. There is one part of the logic that always bugs me every time I watch it, which is the thing of Jim Gordon faking his death. He probably could have told his wife. Like, I think he probably could have told his wife that, hey, I'm going to fake my death just in case. And the fact that people fell for it, it's like, well, they would have seen that he was alive, like, and then he's driving the truck when he reveals himself. So people had to know there's Jim Gordon. He wasn't just walking around with a man. Like, you don't want to ask specific logistical questions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So even though the movie and the trilogy is sort of grounded, it has a grounded practical effect. It's not strict. When it cheats when it needs to cheat, and it's fine.
Now, along that logic line, something that I've struggled with on that is I still do not understand what purpose him faking his death served. Near as I can tell, whether or not he was alive, nothing would have changed.
Yeah, you're right. Nothing changed. All you get is like it's for the audience cheering.
Did you actually get audience cheering at your screening?
The audience did cheer like that. There's a couple of big cheer moments. And it's like they flip the truck. Whoa. Batman spins his motorcycle up the wall and around. That's a cheer. And then Gordon reveals his face to save Batman. 3 cheers.
That's not a movie making tactic I usually associate with Nolan. Is the big cheering moment style.
Yeah, but he does it though. Like he is kind of like a magician sort of guy. Like he likes to do card up the sleeve tricks. He likes to, what's it called? The ball in the cups. Why would it be called 3-card? What is that called? Well, you know what I'm talking about. But he likes to do little parlor game tricks.
The Prestige, so to say.
The Prestige, exactly. I think The Prestige and Inception are both pretty revealing movies towards his inner life, I think. Or at least that's what I am projecting onto him. But what about Harvey Dent? Harvey Dent.
So you mentioned earlier that he gets dunked on a lot. Sort of not the kind of a rushed representation, I think, is how you described it at the time.
Yeah.
I liked it. I think Aaron Eckhart's a good actor. I think he nailed the general performance of the arc that he goes through. The only thing that really bugged me is the turn to extreme violence felt a little bit rushed. It was a little bit of a F it. Let's go straight to murder.
Yeah. They try to set it up. I noticed more in the rewatches of like he punches the guy out who brings a gun on him in the court case against Maroney in the beginning. So in the first scene that we see him, he is violent. We see later when he thinks that Gordon is dead, he's imitating that he's potentially going to shoot one of the Arkham inmates, and he's flipping a coin that we don't know yet is double sided. I don't think know that yet. He keeps saying, oh, he controls his own luck, but it's not until a little bit later that it's revealed that both sides are it's a double headed coin. It's a trick coin.
Quote, I make my own luck.
I make my own luck.
Now, of course, after he's hurt, one side's burnt, so it's actually literal coin flip.
Yeah, it's a good explanation for the coin, and it gives it a lot more weight, knowing that the scarred side represents where his family died. You know how he was viewing Rachel as his family, and so it's not just a reminder of his accident, but a reminder of everything he lost.
Now, I wonder to some extent if there was something written but not filmed, or filmed but cut out, where they go a little bit more into the maybe he's not so great before the injury, because all we get is him a little one-off conversation of him and Gordon, and it's like, well, that's not what the people at the station I hear call me. I don't know what you're talking about, man. And they call you Two-Face.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a pretty tight movie for being 2.5 hours. I think it like any additional scenes have the potential of making it drag a little bit. So it is kind of economical with the Harvey Dent stuff, but the beats are there at least in terms of seeing him planting the seed that he is violent, or maybe a bit like it could be there more. I don't disagree that we could, like, for example, like maybe he might have, maybe we see him like snap at Rachel one time accidentally, or when he's nervous at the party, he snaps at Alfred. Like maybe he does something that's like a little bit, in bad character to make us go, oh, Harvey Dent, maybe he's got some other side to him. So in conclusion, yeah, he should have snapped at Alfred.
Nobody should ever yell at Michael Caine.
Yeah, that's how you know this is going to be a bad guy. Bad guy. Love the ending. I love. It's very tense. It's in the Batman, Gordon, and Dent, kind of an inversion of them on the rooftop at the beginning, making their pact together to take down the mob, and then at the end they're faced with the scarred and compromised and murderous Harvey Dent Two-Face. Which is, I think it's a movie invention that he's Harvey Two-Face. I think we might have brought this up when we were talking about Batman Forever, that they call him Harvey Two-Face. But they do it again here in The Dark Knight. They say Harvey Two-Face. It's very strange, but Harvey Two-Face. Pointing the gun at the child. And I like Batman making the sacrifice to take the hit, doing the thing that only the masked man in this situation can do. I like the long shot of him running away, injured, having been shot and fell off a 3-story building, career-ending injury.
That said, Mask of the Phantasm did it better.
Yeah. Very similar. I like those long shots of Batman running, because it's just a reminder that, like, he's weird. This is a weird guy. A weird character running around in a cape and a cowl in the docks of this weird city.
Yeah. This is a rare case where Nolan nails the ending. Like, I've complained about this in other recordings. Again, a problem with Nolan is he has such great ideas and then just cannot pull it together for the ending. But this is one of maybe 2 movies he's done where I think the ending actually comes together and it's earned.
Yeah.
That said, what he does with that ending, we'll get to.
Yeah, I guess we'll get to it now. I guess we'll get to The Dark Knight Rises. So, maybe the most anticipated movie since Avengers, it was before Avengers Endgame, but like, this is a very hotly anticipated movie. How are they possibly going to follow up The Dark Knight? Well, he did Inception. Inception was great. What are they going to do next? And Bane is so exciting. Catwoman's going to be in it. And then people were widely disappointed. They did not like this movie. Bane's voice was immediately mocked for being both inaudible and goofy. The shadows. Everybody can do a Bane impression because it's super fun. Catwoman, people were pretty cold on Anne Hathaway's take. Joseph Gordon-Levitt as a pseudo combination Robin. People were also kind of, and the logic gets even looser and stretchier and more comic booky. How does Bruce Wayne get into this no man's land with no resources, no money, no Alfred? I don't know. The comic books don't answer that either. When they do that situation in the comics, they don't explain how Batman gets in and out of no man's land. He just can.
Just can't.
And why is it that Batman's, great comeback against Bane is no? Bane says, "Oh, you came back to die with your people." No, I came here to stop you. Good one, Batman. And then what's your plan of attack? Just going to punch him in the face harder this time. Going to punch him in the mask. And then Catwoman's going to shoot him with a gun. And technically, Batman didn't kill him. And then Batman, you're going to get rid of a bomb, just like in Batman 66. It very similar to Batman 66. You just can't find a good place to get rid of the bomb, except out over the harbor, where apparently you fixed the autopilot and you swam away. It seems very difficult to believe, but we're just not gonna think about it too much. And that's the movie in general, is like you gotta kind of squint because it's got the weakest, it has the most plot holes, which are things that I don't love dwelling on plot holes, I guess, because it's more of like, does the movie overall resonate? It is a movie that does the same arc with Bruce Wayne Batman 2 times back to back, which is, okay, Bruce Wayne is retired. He's old and broken. There's no possible way he could become Batman again. What's this? He's got determination. He's doing push-ups. He's got a leg brace. Why, he is Batman again. He is Batman again. Oh, my. And then Bane breaks his back, and then he's in a jail, in a pit. And it's like, well, Bruce Wayne is old and broken. There's no possible way he could become Batman again. What's this? He's got push-ups. He's got determination. He's got a rope tied around his waist. I think he can be Batman again. I think he can. And there's only 24 hours left until he detonates the nuclear bomb that's going to destroy Gotham. Well, first, we make sure to do my art project of painting a exploding bat symbol on the bridge to let everyone know Batman's here. And all of the cops are going to fight against all of the terrorists and Bane.
It's about the symbol. It's about the motivation. It's worth it to spend 4 hours to douse a bridge in gasoline.
Exactly.
More so than any of these other movies, this feels like a comic book. As you've said, it's full of plot holes. There's a lot of weird leaps that happen. Not a lot of what happens makes sense from that sort of grounded point of view. And it's weird coming from the other 2 movies, which try and hang on to that sort of loose grip to reality. It's confusing, I guess, in that regard. That said, this movie gets a lot of hate, and I was going in expecting to hate it, but I didn't. It was fine. There were things that bugged me about it, like Bane being entirely ADR'd really bugged me, but maybe that's because I'm somebody who works in film.
No, it's really annoying. It never, ever feels like he's in the same room. And it did in the first cut, because similar to The Dark Knight, they played The Dark Knight Rises opening with Bane in front of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. And the Twitter reaction was like, nobody can understand what Bane is saying. And that's true. It was harder to understand what he was saying, but it did sound like it was mixed in with the rest of the scene.
Interesting. I'll have to go and watch that clip sometime and see if it feels any more natural or better.
It's a little better, but it's definitely like more garbled. So it's like, was getting caught part of your master plan? Well, gosh. What's the next step in your master plan? Crashing this brain. So it's way more like, what? What was that?
So I went online and YouTubed the comparison. So let's take a quick listen here.
Or perhaps he's wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane. Or perhaps he's wondering why someone would shoot a man before throwing him out of a plane.
It's a pretty shocking difference. I mean, I don't think you can understand him in the before unless you know what the dialogue is in advance. It's that muffled, that incomprehensible. It's a mess.
Yeah.
That said, I think because of how much Tom Hardy acts with his arms in the movie, it makes that ADRing feel that much worse, because it's almost like you're watching like a B or C level anime when you're watching him doing his thing, because it's The power pose and the like, if I could see his mouth, I'm pretty sure the movements wouldn't match kind of feeling.
Yeah, yeah, that's funny that he's like pantomiming like a mascot character. He is a little bit. He is a little bit. I think the fight between him and Batman is really good. The first one, I think he does a good job of seeming very physically intimidating. Even though, I mean, they do shoot Hardy from some angles to try to make him seem really much bigger, but he seems like the same size, frankly, as Batman in all the scenes that they're in together. If anything, it looks like Bane's maybe a little smaller, which is a little strange because Bane is theoretically like twice this. Like he's supposed to make Batman seem like a smaller guy because he's so big. Now he did that in Batman and Robin, and who gave a shit? But in here, it's really more about the presence. It's more that like Bane is like harder. He's like it doesn't. It's not necessarily that he's like that's way more a comic book thing of like, oh, he's got muscles on top of muscles. Here it's like he's way more ruthless and more determined and more just a sharper blade than Batman is at this point in his career, where he put himself on a shelf. He's become a elf on a shelf, a legend. It's interesting. It's definitely like it does take from the comics like the other two movies did as well, but it changes it around a bit. It's not quite the Dark Knight Returns arc, though it is a little bit in terms of an aged Bruce Wayne coming out of retirement. It's not quite Nightfall, with Batman being pushed to his physical and mental and emotional limits before being snapped like a twig by Bane, but it is a little bit. It's not quite No Man's Land, with Gotham being declared no longer U.S. territory by the U.S. government because of damage to it, but it is a little bit. And it's fun to see those 80s and 90s crossovers from the comic books onto the big screen. And so I like that about it, even though it's not a literal translation of any of them. It's a nice blend of them, and I think mostly elevates the comic material. So the ways in which it's comic booky didn't bug me at the time. I was kind of like, all you fake Batman fans who only like him because he's in Heat 2, aka The Dark Knight. You see a little bit of comic bookiness and you go running for the hills. But they're not wrong. It's not a wrong critique to be like, yeah, the movie's a lot goofier. It is. I don't know. I like it.
There's interesting aspects to the movie, I guess, in plot, in that I don't know if this is how it is in the comics, where Bane and Talia are kind of a bit of a what if scenario for Batman.
Yeah, that is that's another example of them pulling from the comics and kind of extrapolating. Because there was a mini series around in the late 90s where Bane joined forces with Ra's al Ghul and Talia as part of the legacy storyline, where Ra's al Ghul was going to unleash a plague upon the world that would drastically reduce the overall global population. And Bane and Talia, Bane was hoping to be her lover, and Talia, I don't know, she was still like pining for Batman, obviously. And that's kind of the Miranda Tate angle is a invention of the movie, and the way that Bane and Talia are specifically linked is also part of just the Nolanverse. But I think it is like I said, I think it's an elevation of the material.
I hated
Oh yeah,
Miranda Tate at first.
Yeah.
I thought
sure.
it was the dumbest thing in the world. And then I sat there and thought about it. I'm like, oh no, this actually makes complete sense. This is, what if Talia was just Ra's al Ghul, but better at the job?
Yeah. And I kind of like, this is not really in the movie. It's not really even subtext in the movie, but I like to think that she's like intentionally trying to behave like he wishes Rachel did, so to sort of like get into his mind and heart and under his skin, and then reveal herself as Talia al Ghul and twist the knife at the end. And also, I think this is going to be a 3-parter, because I don't have the energy to talk about the whole post Nolan world.
There's so much.
That's a whole other conversation of like Zack Snyder.
There's so much.
The Snyderverse, Lego Batman, Robert Pattinson, like that. everything post Nolan, I think is a separate. I think there's a part 3.
I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think we might be able to get through a couple of these movies a little bit quicker because
There's less to say.
I don't think there's much to say about Suicide Squad.
Yeah, there's some where we're just going to be like, but these movies I feel like deserve discussion, and even though they've been talked about so many times and we're kind of repeating some of those things, we're trying to find a earnest, honest reaction to these. And one of the guiding lights of The Void is, well, who gives a shit? Why does any of this matter? Well, one reason that it maybe matters is because for some reason people are very attracted to this character, and there's something that keeps it going, even though logically it's pretty tenuous a lot of the time. But there's still something. Maybe it's just the silhouette. Maybe it's just the aesthetic. There's something to it.
This movie blew the ending so bad, and people still want it more. Like, kind of a bad sacrificial message about how much are you willing to lose to protect what you love, even if what you love kind of sucks. And it doesn't really deliver that very well.
Right, because in the end, he just ditches Gotham anyway. So he's off in France eating baguettes with Selena Kyle.
Yeah. Oh my god, and don't get me started on Selena Kyle's MacGuffin in this movie. It's the least believable thing in the entire Nolan trilogy. Just that there's a flash drive that can break into every database in the universe and erase your existence. Like,
Yeah.
I can't. I what can I say other than that's dumb even for a comic book?
Another random thing that about this movie, there's a moment where Selena Kyle, Catwoman, they never call the dumb Nolan thing of like, they never call her Catwoman. She doesn't even get called the cat. She's just, she's once referred to as a cat burglar. And she looks like a cat with her high-tech goggles, but like they can't say Catwoman. That would be too silly. It's implied that she's Catwoman. But Selena Kyle and Batman get into his the Bat helicopter. She says a line, "My mother always warned me not to get into cars with strange men." And he says, "This isn't a car." But I always like to think that he actually says, "I'm not a man. I'm a little boy.
Playing with his toys.
Scared little boy." It is a dumb movie. But I have no intelligent way of defending it. So, I just like it. Another thing I like about the Nolan trilogy is how each one is kind of like a different genre. Like the last one is The Dark Knight Rises. This is a disaster movie. This is like a big scale event disaster. A city is taken over and annexed by a rogue nation. Obviously, The Dark Knight is like a crime movie, much more grounded in the mob and street gangs and that sort of bit. And then the first movie being essentially a treatise on fear and sort of, a little, not quite a horror take on Batman, but a thriller. So it goes thriller, crime, disaster. And that's pretty neat.
I'm very curious. You mentioned earlier that they changed direction pretty dramatically for Rises after the death of Ledger.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this. So enlighten me, the naive masses.
Not much is known. Sure. Not much is known. What we do know is that they had a outline for 3 movies, and the original idea for movie 2 was, the original idea for movie 3 was it was going to be the Joker's trial, and Harvey Dent was going to get scarred at that point. So that obviously changed at some point during the development of The Dark Knight, where they realized, okay, the whole Harvey Dent arc makes way more sense in a self-contained story as opposed to he turns bad in 3. So that's all we know. All we know is that they were thinking Joker's trial was going to be something. And I think, the way that The Dark Knight ends with the Joker saying, "Oh, we're going to do this, you and I, forever," and the way that they kind of even like parody the end of Batman 89, like the Joker falls off a building because Batman grapples his foot. He falls up, but this time he has a no-kill rule, so he saves the Joker. So it's frustrating because I think there's a lot of ways it could go, but I think it would have been like a Joker as Hannibal Lecter kind of thing, where he's sort of taunting / helping Batman, but we don't we don't know. I think it is very believable, credible that they each time were like, let's just give this one movie our everything, as opposed to holding things back. I think that really
Right.
was their approach. But at the same time, I think they did have like a general sense of what the arc overall would be for their villains. And I think the time jump, my just intuition and suspicion is that that's informed by not being able, like, not wanting to even address the Joker.
Right.
Like 8 years have passed, so presumably he got the death penalty or something, because nobody even mentions him.
I'm based on what you've said, I'm pretty glad we didn't see this Trial of the Joker movie. A courtroom drama featuring Batman does not seem like the most intriguing scenario.
Right. And I don't know that it would have been that. Like, it may have been in the way that The Dark Knight is the battle for Harvey Dent's soul. It might have been the trial of the Joker in the way that the Kangaroo Court in The Dark Knight Rises might have freed the Joker. I don't fucking know. I don't know.
It would have given us a second crack at Harvey Dent getting hurt in a courtroom, though, after the mess that was Forever.
That's right. You know, we might talk more about the Nolan movies in part 3, but these are our main thoughts on the Nolan movies. Part 3, we're going to wrap up all of the available Batman movies to date and then finally rank them. That's what we will do here on The Void.
Tune in next time. Same Bat Void. Same Bat Void.
Hell yeah.